Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. We are going to see today, try to discuss that with a very good author and also a very well known historian and scholar in India, and about the similarities between Indian and Chinese culture. And when did the Chinese get Indian culture, or how did Indians also got influenced by the Chinese culture, especially in the Northeast? Both ways. Earlier there were no such borders where people were traveling freely, and so a lot of dissemination of knowledge on both sides have taken place. And one thing I can say, that even though the Chinese Communist Party may not agree, but behind the back everyone agrees that somewhere their knowledge came from. They did not were the not the original creators other than the language script. We'll all ask all these questions. I'm not an expert on China, so therefore we'll ask. So, without delay, let us welcome Professor Dr. Shashibala. Namaskar. So, you have done a lot of research on this for many years, many years. Yeah, that's what I understood from your talks earlier when I spoke to you. So, people are amazed about dharma. When Americans think about dharma, they only think about Orientals. They don't think about India, where dharma is a core concept in Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and it seems to be the same concept in the Chinese. So, what is the equivalence of the word dharma in Chinese? Let's start off from there.
Dharma in Chinese, it's a difficult word for them because they don't want to accept it. But what is dharma actually? The meaning of dharma is the values. It is the value system. They are the odd values to create a better human being, because all of us born as human beings in this 5 feet body have a soul, and we are all born with a divine spark in our hearts. So, what Dharma teaches us, Dharma, whether it is Hindu Dharma, whether it is Buddha Dharma, whether it is Jain Dharma, they all believe in Tapa, Tyaga, Jnana, and whatever we have received is to be given to others without any copyrights. So people who are aware of the dharma in the Western system, they don't understand the Indian way of looking at dharma. So when you look at the Chinese, what is dharma for them? So we have to look into their cultural lives first. When you go to Chinese cities, you visit the monasteries, you visit the stupas, you visit the caves, then you can see how people are dharmic there and how they bow in the temples, how they lit huge size in incense. So it shows their dedication, it shows their devotion, how they go, how they chant. What for are they doing this? They are doing for salvation, to get rid of their suffering, to get rid of their problems, to gain something, to receive something, what they aspire for. And they have a faith. Yes, if you go there, if you go to a temple, you pray for it and you get it.
So,
Dharma is there in China, but you have to scratch the people.
but is there any word for it? That's what I wanted to ask. Is there any word for dharma there?
It is actually philosophy for them.
Okay. No, but is there equivalence of the word dharma anything in Chinese?
Dharma in Chinese, like Buddhism, uh,
Buddhism is dharma, because the
Buddhism
Dalai
is
Lama.
dharma,
But
but Tao and Confucius is philosophy, not dharma.
no, but there is no equivalence for the word dharma.
It's difficult to find parallel words in
Oh,
Chinese.
okay. That's what I wanted to ask. So, because I wanted to see what are the commonalities in the language, culture, and so that's
I
why.
would say when you talk of language, there are no commonalities.
Uh-huh.
When you talk of script, there is nothing common. When you talk of their way of living, eating, dressing up, there is no commonality between us. But what is common between the two countries is that both the civilizations are born and brought up, they develop on the banks of the rivers with an open mind. So, the most important part, or you can see perspective of Indian Dharma, is that the rishis developed this as a philosophy of life along the banks of the rivers under the pure blue sky where birds are chirping, everything is free, everything is freely available for everybody. You have enough whatever you need for your life. So it is similar with the Chinese mindset, you can say. And moreover, when you talk of the similarities between Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, so there are a few things that did not contradict. They could absorb each other, they could assimilate each other's ideas. For example, the code of conduct, the kindness towards others, for example filial piety, for example worshipping the respecting the ancestors, and there are a few more things which were common, and they could easily absorb the Buddhist ideas, the Buddhist ideals, or you can say the Indian ideals of life. And Indian, on the other side, the Indian philosophy was of assimilation, not of contradiction. We never conflicted with anybody. We didn't. We never demean or destroy anything. But wherever we went with something to give them, to assimilate into our fold, and we could be assimilated into their fold. That is why you can see a number of things which are changed in China in the Chinese way.
See, when I went to Shanghai, and I've been to Shanghai every year, I used to go before coronavirus. And Shanghai, Wuhan, many of these places I visited, even last year, 2019. One thing was very funny. They were singing American pop songs in a Chinese English way. It's very, very funny. Like hearing Brian Adams in the Chinese person singing it, it's like it just crosses the comedy of everything. And I could see one thing common between the India and there. They're too much enamored by American culture. In one thing in Shanghai, I was seeing Apple phone is a status symbol, and it has to be purchased from an Apple store, even though Chinese make it, but still it has to be done. And the secondly was American cars. It's craze. They would like to pay any premium for American cars, Chevrolet or anything else. But when it came to India, and see, I have an American passport, and when I go and there's my skin is Indian and I speak it, I'm from India, so they can recognize immediately. On the immigration, they'll show all the respect when I enter as an American citizen. But in when I go around in the coffee shops and other places in within China, there was a like a think they according to them they think that they're very superior to anyone with a brown skin. Is this a recent propaganda by the CCP, or it is something which is part of their culture that they don't trust the politically they don't trust the white man, but culturally they want to be close to the white man? Why is that like that? Have you noticed that anytime?
I don't think so because for me, because wherever you go in any country, it depends where are you visiting, who are the people you are meeting, and what are you talking to them, and what are you for what have you gone there. And there are a number of things. For example, if I go to China, then there is so much respect for me because I am an Indian, I am a scholar. I can tell them about their own culture, about their own paintings, about their own heritage, what they cannot know, what they do not know. For years and years of experience, research, they couldn't find out what I could tell them. And when I go there, I find different things. For example, for you, it was more of pop songs and all these things. But for me, it's Sanskrit there. I went to the Great Wall of China, so I could see the Sanskrit mantras written there in the 14th century and for the defense of China. We Indians played a great role in the defense of China. because our acharyas used to go there to protect them. So they used to do pujas and ritual ceremonies, etc., for so that they could win in the war. So on the Great Wall of China, I will go if I go, because I went there and I could see the Sanskrit mantras. And you saw there these pop songs, but for me it was the beautiful dances of the Dunhuang caves. I could see so much similarities in the dance, in the music, because everything went from India, whether it's drama. So there is a Chinese singer. She is very famous, and she has launched a number of albums, and she sings only Sanskrit mantras. From her mother's side, she has Mongol blood. From the father's side, she has Chinese blood, and it's amazing to listen to her. So for me, there is a different China and different Chinese. Maybe for others, there is a different China and different Chinese. And the behavior, yes, behavior changes. I agree that when we go as Indians, as so many people come to discuss with me about the similarities, about the dissimilarities, about the culture, about dissemination of culture, about the Vedic philosophy about the Upanishadic philosophy, about the philosophy of friendship, what are our fundamental principles of friendship. So there is a lot of craze in China to understand Indian philosophy of all kinds, not just Vedic or Upanishadic, but Sankhya and Vedanta and all, and of course Buddhist. And I have amazing experiences while visiting China.
So Chinese Communist Party published in 2012 published a Chinese version of Bhagavad Gita, and they actually they all and also they banned many like the temples or communities in even in Hong Kong. They have now banned where people cannot be openly practicing. And I totally agree with you that Chinese people are different than Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
Communist Party may represent a political view which is a very I don't demean nationalism is always good, but it's a overzealous nationalism where the Communist Party is the sole custodian of China. That's all. People are totally different. I totally
Ye-
agree. We have a lot of Chinese Americans here who
yes.
have traveled with me in my delegations over there. So
You
in
cannot,
which, yes, please go ahead.
yeah, you cannot come to any decision talking about the Communist Party, about the people of China, how they look, how they behave, how they feel. Because there are many things which I know that they are prohibited to do, but they do all such things behind the four walls of their homes.
Yeah.
Nobody can restrict them.
There are a lot of Chinese followers of Bhagavad Gita. They visit regularly India, Vrindavan. They are there every year. They come. So, and like you mentioned, there's a singer who can recite in Sanskrit mantra, and you are also mentioning the Sanskrit inscriptions on the Great Wall of China. All this is recorded. Like the Lhasa, there is a temple in which I forgot the name of the temple. In the top floor of the temple, there are Hyun Sang diaries are kept of his visits to India, and they respect that. So, how many cultural sites have you seen in China who have those kind of cultural respect for India?
Oh, so many. How many can I tell you? Because I traveled along the Silk Route.
Uh-huh.
I traveled to all these former kingdoms. I traveled to Xi'an, to Kunming, to Beijing, to Chengdu, to Dunhuang, to so many cities. And wherever I go, my major area of research is because Buddhism and culture. So I always go there. For example, when I went to Chengdu, naturally, I visited a monastery where the skull bone of Xuanzang is kept. And when I went there, they were doing renovation of that old monastery, and people were donating bricks like India. You can donate a brick with some money, whatever you want to donate. So when I was there, I said yes, I also want to donate a brick. They said yes. Yeah, they offered me a brick and a brush and the ink, the vermilion color ink that they use for stamps. You must have seen that. So I also donated a brick. So there are a large number of not just sites, but I have studied them with great depth and could tell their scholars. For example, in Dunhuang caves, there are over 100 scholars working there, research, doing their researches for a number of decades, not only years. So when I gave my lectures there, they were so happy, they were so mesmerized that yes, now we can understand our art. So they have so much of respect. And after Dunhuang, when I went to travel along the Silk Road, everywhere special arrangements were made for me, and special topmost archaeologists came to receive us, and I was shown those caves which they don't show to any foreigner. In Kizil, the archaeologists there, the top archaeologists said there that these are the caves which I am opening for you. We did not even open for Mariana Yaltes. I'm giving her the name also, especially because she is one of the foremost German scholars, and they have a great collection from Kizil. Oh, even she was not shown that cave. So they showed me the caves because they wanted to understand. It's their heritage. They are proud of it, and the way they are working on it, you will be amazed at. I have so many scholar friends. I go to their conferences. Last time when went there, it was Beijing Forum. Around 300 people gathered there to talk about culture, and it was so well organized. They are spending huge amount of money. And one thing that I was so surprised at, that they have discovered large number of Sanskrit manuscripts, and whenever they discover something, they do not show to the outsiders. One of my friends, she is also a Sanskrit. She is a professor. She was the head of the department of Sanskrit and Pali in Peking University. She was just sitting with her laptop open and working on a Sanskrit manuscript, and I sitting on her side. It was quite natural. I could see her laptop and I could see the manuscript, and she was so, "Oh, have you seen it?" I said, "Yes." But please don't say you have seen it, because we cannot show you, because they want their scholars to be the first to work on those Sanskrit manuscripts. They didn't want to show me. And suddenly, when I reached somewhere in, I don't remember exactly the name of the city, but when I reached there, and it was just a chance that in the hotel there was a conference going on Sanskrit manuscripts, and they didn't allow me. I requested them, can I join you for a while, because I didn't have time, but for half an hour or so I could join them. But they didn't permit me, because they didn't want to show me the latest discovery of Sanskrit manuscripts. It's their heritage and they are proud of it.
Generally, nowadays, even in US or in India, whether a Chinese scholar, because nobody has, total distrust is there. I'm not political at all, because we have a lot of Chinese students also watching right now. So many Chinese Americans, sorry. So many uh, the influence of Chinese everywhere is taken in a negative way. It may not be, because I trust many of them, many of my friends over there. But the general impression is, if they invest in any university, they want to bring out their own version of it, which is very good. Actually, India should also do that. But the point is that if they are investing in Sanskrit for India, they want to promote their own ideology, because I think the politics is not separate from academics. What is your view on that, since you work on the academic side?
Yes, you cannot change the academics because of politics. They cannot use it as a tool. They try it many times. For example, we started building the Nalanda University. But China is the first to have built it, to have started it. And the way they are working, we should learn from them. I'm so inspired by their scholars, the way they are working, how depth, to look at the depth of their knowledge, the work they are doing, so much of enthusiasm there, so much of hard work they are putting in, so much of money they are putting in, how many Confucius centers they have opened all over the world. So they are doing their best and they are successful. So we should also learn from them. We should also
Definitely.
do something. Why don't we open our centers of studies, maybe Sanskrit studies, maybe Indology, maybe whatever we can. So it's our philosophy, it's our Vedic. These are our values. These are our Indic studies. Why don't we open the Indic studies centers? So India should learn from them. Hard work, dedication to work. It's a challenge. The
Definitely true.
enormous work that they are doing, I really respect them.
Definitely true, because the Chinese government is sponsoring many of the Chinese study centers in virtually every single American university. And also, they're trying their best to penetrate every single Indian university where they can set up their own Chinese philosophy study center. They're trying to do that through money, through influence, and virtually every single embassy in the world, Chinese embassy in the world, has a cultural attache which is just there to promote their own language,
Yes.
Mandarin, mostly Mandarin, which is mainland language. Now, but that we do not see in terms of India. The fact we are doing it for American audience, so we're speaking in English, but Indians do not invest. I mean, the Indian, I would say, foreign missions do not invest in promoting yoga as a education or dharma, or these are the core philosophies from India that definitely that is lacking to some extent. But another important part, and I'm strictly going by uh, another important part is what, you already mentioned that there is a good hunger for Indian culture over there. You said recently Indian movies were very successful there. They have sponsored some of the movies also. They paid for them. But what are the level of which sections of the history which China is particularly interested in? Because the academics divide the world history into very ancient history, Paleolithic, Neolithic, and then the medieval history and the modern history. So, what part of history is are Chinese interested in?
I think they are not restricted to any part of the history, and because their own history goes back long back, and they are really interested in all the levels of all the ages of history. And the last 2000 years, because it's my area of specialization, and I meet people of that area, so I would say yes, there is a lot of interest in that, the history of the last 2000 years. So many people are working on it, or on our connections, because they have so much of historical records. China is really, it really inspires me that how they have written their history, the dynastic histories, the travelogues of the monks, the lives of the people, the lives of the Indian monks, the lives of the Chinese monks. There is a lot, and they have written so many inscriptions. They are very perfect in writing history, and they are all, yes, they are interested also in that. For example, I visited in Xi'an. There is a place that is called Forest of Inscriptions, and in that museum, they have collected all the stones which were engraved, on which the Sanskrit text they are translated into Chinese. They are engraved, and anybody can come and take a stampage. So in those, I have also worked on very few, because I don't know Chinese, but I can use Chinese script and use the dictionary. So with the help of that, I could work on some parts of some inscriptions, and it is amazing how they write it. India should learn it. I'm an Indian. I'm proud of my country, but whatever we can, when we communicate with somebody, it's always give and take. We have given a lot to China. We haven't received much, except a few three kinds of fruits that came from China. Otherwise, no, nothing we have received from them. It's all that we have given to them. But now, the way they are progressing, now the way they are working hard to build their country, that we should learn.
No, that is true because they're very hardworking, just like Indians. And also,
This
there is one thing about China is a historical fact that they have taken ideas from other countries, but they are good producers. It is a historical fact. Like if you
yes,
train them in some manufacturing process, they'll produce the perfect item every time. That detail they have. But as far as the new ideas, innovations, they still look out to other people, and that's why they sponsor research in American universities, Western universities, and they do take information from India, which is freely available. Uh, and that is also do. I mean, there has to be in India. There has to be a system where every single that thing that they take should be licensed to them. If you do not license to them, then they change it and they make it new. Like for example, I'll give you a very simple example, and you are right about the history. In my first book, Debunking Mythology, I relied on Chinese historical accounts and also Russian historical accounts and the University of Cairo accounts. And I did visit many universities in Beijing and Shanghai, Wuhan, and Xinjiang province. Also, many places I visited, including Lhasa. And there, when I met these historical scholars, uh, most of their records were highly, you know, did some of them did not match the Indian records and their dates, but their dates did match the University of Cairo's records, Egyptian university records, and their details of historical accounts of travel, including the faith, Buddhism, which they do not recognize that Confucius came from Buddhism. They don't recognize that. They have completely hyphenated it. So the Taoism, which is also existentially dead over there, is do you think that they have any interest in maintaining the cultural connections with India on the
yes. So
academic side?
again, it is the difference between the government and the people. People are really interested in understanding in looking at the Indian culture. They want to learn a lot. Can you believe that 2 years ago, when I was in an ashram in Coimbatore, Sadhguru's ashram, Isha ashram, I was there, and I was so amazed at them that there were so many Chinese. What were they doing there? They were all devoted to dharma, or you can say spirituality. They were doing their meditation so intensely, and finally when I saw them going back also, because every day people used to go back, and you could see at the counter that how many people are coming, like there is a reception in the hotel, so there was a reception in the ashram also. So you could see people how huge paintings and photographs they were carrying from the ashram. What were they doing? Why were they carrying so? Because they are so much interested in Indian culture, and I have so many friends. They want to come to India. They love India. They visit India. So there is a lot of interest in Indian culture. The only thing is that there are different types of people. Some people come to India to visit holy places. There are some who come to learn Indian dance. Indian dance is there is so much of interest in Indian dance in China. Music also, and also visiting historical places. But they are not that happy to visit the historical places because they have maintained their places, their sites so well.
That is true. That is true. I mean, a lot can be done in India on maintaining historical sites. Uh,
We have to maintain them not only as tourist places but also as places of pilgrimage, because many of the people from the Buddhist world, they come as devotees, they come as pilgrims. So we have to understand their feelings. They are not, for us, they are just archaeological sites, but they are sacred places for them where Buddha was born or whatever was there. So they have faith in that.
Definitely, definitely. I totally agree with you. Most of the world, they want to visit the historical sites of India, even the small, small temples of India, whether it's Buddhist or Hindu, and they really feel hurt when India doesn't respect their own culture, because they come to India reading Ramayana, Mahabharat, and Bhagavad Gita, so they think it's a land of culture, and when they see the Indians or the generally not taking care of those sites as good as they would expect in their own country, like if you go to Italy, then they maintain their history very well, very well. Even though it's right or wrong, I will not go there. Whether it's China, like you just explained, they maintain their cultural sites very well. Whether right or wrong, I don't want to go there. But still, that is a good thing which you're saying, which you can definitely take from there. Another thing which you also mentioned, you mentioned an ashram. There are a lot of Chinese travelers coming to all types of Indian spiritual sites, all types. Whether it's a they come to Kumbh Mela. There's a big Chinese contingent also last time. They will come to West Bengal. They'll come to there are places in Guwahati. They will come. So not just for these are the individual Chinese travelers. So what is the academic side or the spiritual side they're particularly interested in? Like you mentioned, Isha Ashram. I don't think so.
That
They're
is
coming
a
there for
Buddhist
Buddhism.
site, but also a few Hindu ashramas.
Uh huh.
For example, Sadhguru's ashram attracts a lot of people from abroad because the way he speaks is very modern. It appeals to the young minds.
Yeah, ISKCON also has a huge followership. ISKCON and even the some other Sampradaya, Ramakrishna
One
Mission, they
day,
have a huge following.
one day.
Yeah,
They
oh,
have,
huge
yeah.
following they have. So coming to the one, uh, one question of which is one site in China which is the closest to which is a closest symphony between Hinduism and Buddhism. If you have anything in record on your mind.
Hinduism and Buddhism and the Chinese side.
Yeah,
Bhutaishan, Bhutaishan, I would say, because Bhutaishan, for example, we have faith in visiting the four Char Dham
yeah.
place, four places of pilgrimage, and then we say, okay, now it's complete. So in China also, they have four places of pilgrimage, and one of them is Bhutai Shan has been declared as a cultural heritage site by UNESCO, and it has, even now it has 95 temples. Like in India, wherever there is an ancient temple, many people go and build their own smaller temples. So in Bhutan, yes, there are a huge number of temples. They are built by the people,
Which part of China
and
is that?
they still exist. They still exist.
Which part of China is that? This place?
Bhutan is the name of a mountain.
Mountain. Okay.
Central, yeah.
Which part of which province is that?
Center.
Okay. And is it like the major city nearby where people can go to from there?
Yeah, you can check it.
Okay. So the my last question in this will be the when you try to I always said that the perception is very different nowadays because of political side, and we are not political discussing at all. Academic side also it has changed a lot because the language, there is a very good thing about one thing about Chinese is that they're always promoting their language, and people have to learn Chinese to do business with them. People have to learn Chinese to live there, but in that emphasis is not in India. Why do you think that emphasis on the language comes from? Because language defines the culture of the land.
You see, we were slaves. We were invaded. So slavery of such a long time has left its imprint, and so far it couldn't go. to have faith in our own languages.
See, when will the
English still dominates our minds.
when will the time will come when Americans would like to learn Sanskrit and Hindi to do business in India?
Soon, it's coming soon because so many people are excited to learn Sanskrit, not only as a language, but because they know there is so much written about the science and technology in Sanskrit. And if they learn it, they can decode it, they can progress in the field of science and technology.
There
That is why they are doing, not for learning Sanskrit as a language of India.
there is an American Sanskrit.
Change coming. There's a big change coming. I know so many departments in so many countries how they are teaching Sanskrit because of its impact on mind, because of training the mind, because of training the brain also, because of development of brain, because of saving one from so many diseases, chanting of mantras. Many things are coming up. I hope within a short span of time, maybe 10 years or so, you'll see the difference.
See, in many
India is
university,
now working on a large scale.
in many of the American universities, Western society has discovered the advantage of Sanskrit, but India has lost it. So when you want to do the business with India, they have to still speak in English. So
Yes.
when you come to India, you cannot speak in we cannot speak in local languages like or Hindi or very few Americans they learn Hindi based on their love for Indian culture. They speak very fluent Hindi. Very few Americans, I can count them in thousands right now, but they are speaking Sanskrit or Hindi language very fluently. They live in India also, many of them. But learning from Chinese, if you want to do business in China, there are a lot of schools in the Hollywood, and they they glorify Chinese characters, as a strength. So the image which Chinese have projected on the general uh, Western society is that they are good warriors, they are good scientists, they are good technicians, computer scientists, and the general image with Indians are projected to the Western audience is they're good doctors. There's a very common when you see an Indian, every American business or channel or media or governance, they'll project Indian as a doctor. So, but when you see Chinese, they present as a warrior, difficult to fight. That's the impression that they have created.
Now the impression is changing. The way our soldiers fought with the Chinese soldiers,
Indians know that. Indians know that. See the so
they
Indians
could
know
taste.
that.
The Chinese soldiers could taste.
That is true. I mean, there's a joke that they're TikTok soldiers, and
Yeah.
many of those jokes are still there. But
So it is amazing even for us how our soldiers are fighting.
even for Indians, it has shocked. The Indian army has shocked it that they are that
Even we were shocked
we
that,
were,
oh, our soldiers are so brave and so strong. I
because
didn't
they have never been tested, but they have been good projection they have done. And I would give all credit to Chinese Communist Party, good or bad, but at least they have done some fake projection. And but when they're tested on the ground, they completely fizzle out.
but people know. No, it's different. You
So
can look at the vaccination now. How is it happening in India?
so the biggest surprise for the world is the secrecy of Chinese society. So is it
Yeah,
a
they are
cultural thing?
very well controlled. Media is very well controlled,
Very
but it's good for their country. All countries they need to do it. Whatever they want to leak, okay, it's allowed. What is the harm? If you look from the Chinese perspective,
See, there is no harm. You see that there is no harm when you secret. Is it a culture or is it like induced on them?
it's induced.
Induced. That's what I'm saying. That because my experience is the Chinese talk too much. I have good friends over there. I have to tell them, shut up for some time, because I have to keep them quiet too much. But when you hear from anything from China, Like when I went to, I've visited a lot of times. Complete silence everywhere. People are not talking too much.
How to speak.
Yeah, they're all on the phone, cell phones.
Administration is very strict,
Very strict. You know.
but disciplined.
Yeah. In
We
India,
need
too much freedom you have. It's totally opposite of that.
we are free to talk, free to do anything, but there are good and bad. I
In
think
freedom index today, India will go even above US today in terms of what you can speak.
it has. Yeah, look at the vaccination for COVID
Exactly, exactly.
and how we controlled it. Look at the population here. Look at the discipline among the people. Whatever the prime minister announces, how many people are following his instructions? And still, you can see if you have a disciplined society, it's easy for a prime minister to control. But if you have an Indian like society, then how to control it? But still, what is the death rate in India and what is the death rate in US and Europe? So one has to compare. No? There is data for everything.
See, there
So
is
now
a
India is not the India of 25 years ago.
Indian intellectualism has never been questioned by anybody in the world. Nobody has questioned that because they always know that Indians, the 1857 revolt against the British, right from that time, whenever the time has come, Indians have united and stood up against the injustice. It has happened historically in India, and the media projection has not been correct because of the bad historians. And now, if somebody has to rewrite the history of India, and first of all bring out the real heroes, like in other countries, like in China, they respect their own heroes, even though right now they only have one type of heroes which are approved by the Communist Party. But if there are other heroes, if the people are allowed to speak, I think a lot more will come out. Actually, my prediction on last article which I wrote for somebody was that when the Chinese economy or the secrecy actually opens up, because I have traveled across inside China and I cannot comment because I come for different areas. I don't want to bring them into spotlight, but there are people who have not spoken or who are not heard, and there are large groups of people in China. And when they're actually the secrecy thing opens up, the world will see that the China, what they project is different than what they actually are, totally, which India has exposed in the north. So, what do you think on the language side, which in Hindi and Mandarin, there's no common in the script or anything, but
Nothing.
the mood is the same. Uh,
Yes.
it's the same way of composition, like in Oriental
Open-minded. Open-mindedness.
open-mindedness. So,
Open-mindedness and thinking in a way, for example, to their attitude towards nature, their attitude towards other human beings, ethics. Yes.
at one time, India was known to be the country of ethics and truth. It was
But even now, how can you say at one time? Please don't say so.
at
Still, India
at
is
one time,
everywhere, in all ages, whether it is Satyug or Kaliyug or Dwapar or Treta, in all the yugas, there were bad and good people both, but the proportion was different. Yes, today also there are good and bad people. There are people who follow the ethics properly. There are people in every society, in every country. We cannot say that's happening in India only.
no, I'm not being critical of
The
India.
way
What I'm,
people
I think,
are very honest. People still are so honest. You can feel that.
no, I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, at one time, the whole world was coming to India for business, for because there was Indian courts and Indian judicial system was
Yes.
known for justice and truth, and that's why it was known as a place where you everybody can come where they can get justice. But in the colonial time, that includes right from the Islamic conquest to the British invasion. Uh, it got corrupted to a large extent. Like the Indian bureaucracy is a large result of that kind of faulty system. But now things are changing, uh, things are more and more Indians are coming out. What do you have to say on that, please?
I'm sorry to say that I have so much of respect for administrators, for the bureaucrats, because they are the people working so hard to run the country. Whenever I have a chance to work with them, of course, it's my more I'm associated to the bureaucrats working in education, culture, or foreign affairs. But I have a lot of respect for them. Not we cannot say everybody is corrupt.
Yeah, not everybody, but the essence of things have.
Corruption is everywhere. Somewhere it's disclosed, it's disclosed, somewhere it's not disclosed. Everywhere there is corruption. It's corruption is there in USA also.
Big.
I,
USA has more corruption than India. I can tell you that. Has more corruption than India.
but only the scale is, I think, much higher.
Like I'll just.
More corruption is not that much that we have in India, but at the higher level, I think whatever I have seen and experienced in USA. Oh,
See, the thing is, in the you touch upon the education sector, and I think the education is a big part in India, big challenge in India. You are yourself an educationist, and you're working on this, where the right history has to be documented and content being produced, which is very much required in India. Which
would
you,
you like to join us? Would you like to join us?
I'm
There are so
always there
many
for you.
historians. There are so many historians who have been working on it hard, and there are on some points they are conflicting with each other. So we have organized a conference on just 22nd, 3rd, and 4th January now, just coming. And after that, we have invited a brilliant audience to take decisions, so that after the Shastrarth, people, the audience will say, yes, we accept this, or we deny this. And finally, there will be another conference, and there will be another conference. And finally, we will prepare a draft chronology and submit it to the government to bring it to the education system.
Please
I
do
am a part
invite
of
me.
the high level. Now I am a part of the high level committee constituted by the government. It's called Mission High Level Committee for Working on Indian Knowledge Systems, and I'm a member of that 9-member committee. The minister himself is a member, and the chief scientific advisor of the prime minister is a member. So there are top scholars who are members of this, and they are working hard for it to bring a real change in the education policy. We have to implement the new education policy. Let's
Um,
hope, let's
yeah,
pray for it.
yeah.
My faith in the divine.
I'll be definitely very open if to participate, and if you want to invite us, we'll definitely be there as Pathology Mission as well.
So, okay, I'll share with you. I'll share with you because the time may not suit you because it's during the day in India.
I'll make time to join.
Okay, fine. I'll pass it on to you. Do join us and see what changes are we bringing.
Yes,
Not me, but there are people.
I totally believe in that. Totally. Uh,
So people are working really hard with dedication and devotion to bring a change, to rewrite the history, to tell the true history, to fix the new chronology on the scientific basis, not on legendary basis.
Thank you so much, Professor Shashibala,
Thank you.
today. And thank
Thank
you
you.
all the viewers who watched it live. I hope you learned something, and you also saw close connections between India and China in terms of culture, and how the two countries have a similar culture but different political philosophies. But at the same time, it's one, if you look at from the dharma point of view, it's a large world. It's like 1.3 billion Indians, 1.4 billion Chinese, and the rest of Southeast Asia. It's almost 150% of the world population. Thank you so much, Shashipala. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And next time, I would like to invite you based on our topics, and we'll have a very interesting more conversation. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Namaskar.
Thank you.